Hi, and welcome to the Jim Ruff Show. Today we have a show on overcoming the crisis in our society. And the guest host today is Dan Shaw, who also has a danshaw.com website. And Dan is up here from Ashland, Oregon, but he's actually moving to Seattle. And he's going to be pursuing a PhD program in the technologies and techniques of democratic decision making. And Dan is also a poet, and he works with energies in different ways, and formerly a publisher in the publishing business. And so, anyway, welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Yeah. And so you're going to be the guest host today, and we're going to talk about the crisis in society.
Well, I think we are not alone, that it's a commonly held perception that our society, our democracy, as we think of it, is in crisis. My perception is that we have a crisis of divisiveness and partisanship, and this is something that I think impacts profoundly on how willing people are to participate in the democratic process, in the electoral process. So I'm very much interested to hear from you how wise democracy and how dynamic facilitation and the Wisdom Council can overcome the apathy and lead to more involvement, widespread involvement in the democratic process.
Right, and I think that's kind of a solution to the crisis that we face, in a way, is that if we get that kind of involvement, then we're dealing with the many systems in our society that are breaking down. I mean, I feel like there's a litany of systems, like the healthcare system, the education system, political system, our defense industry, you name it. We have systems in decline that are actually sometimes even destroying or doing the opposite almost of what they're intended. I think, I mean, a part of the crisis for me is this crisis of the healthcare industry is really sort of keeping us chronically ill, I think. The defense industry is kind of creating war as much as it's preventing war. We have a banking industry that's supposed to be providing, I mean, you name it, and these industries are, and our situation is kind of accelerating, and as you say, the solution, or at least I think the solution, is something around democracy.
Now, I've read some of Society's Breakthrough, your book, and you make the statement that we don't have a democracy. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, the intent of the founders, the intent really was a republic. The demos crassy is the root for the word democracy, and it really means that the common people have the power. Crassy means power, demos means the common people. And the common people are really in charge of what happens. And the founders set up a system that they didn't really want demos crassy. They didn't want democracy. They were afraid of democracy. In their experience, every time democracy had been tried, it had failed. So they were interested in a republic. So, and that's kind of what was established, was a republic.
Now, I tend to think that we have a democratic republic, which is a rule of law, which is somehow guided by the populace, the majority rule. According to Society's Breakthrough, the Constitution and the rule of law you symbolize with a box. You say that an authoritarian society is kind of a triangular model. The republic or the Constitution can be symbolized by the box, the square. And I love how you talk about the evolution from authoritarianism to the box, the rule of law, and then the next step, which you call the circle. Can you tell us a little more about how the circle is something of an evolution of kind of a maturation, perhaps, in our collective psyche from a kind of an authoritarian place?
Well, yeah, that the crisis that we have in our society, I believe, is that we have the wrong system in place. It was a great system for 200 years ago, and I'm not talking about getting rid of the Constitution or anything, but the problem is the rule of law. The word rule is, we can't have the law being in the ruling position. What really needs to be in the ruling position is we the people. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be a conversation of all of us where we visit together and figure out what's best for everybody. That conversation is missing in our society. And so essentially what happened is the founders set up a system, a contract really that they made, a contract that they decided on for their time. It was a great system for them especially, but then there was no more we the people after that to maintain control. I mean, to maintain common sense. So we have a system that's 200 and some years old in charge of us today. This was created before flush toilets and before, not the internet and before movies and TV and automobiles. I mean, this was a system set up for that time that we live in today, and now we find all our systems are tanking, and the problem isn't that their design was bad. Their design's great, maybe it's perfect for us in the future, but it can't be in charge. There has to be a we the people in charge of it. Mm-hmm. So we need to come back and check out how things are coming, or is this the way we want to run things? Do we want to hang out this way? So the difficulty isn't the box is where the system is in charge of us, and the circle is where we are in charge. A conversation is ultimately in charge. Mm-hmm. We may still have the same box, but it's not in charge.
Mm-hmm. So how does the Wisdom Council process shift the paradigm? How do, if I invite 12 randomly selected people in my community to talk about what's important to them, or if we have a constitutional amendment which calls for this non-binding conversation,
yes,
how does that so powerfully impact our paradigm? How do you see that has such a pivotal effect?
That's a great question. I don't think it would shift the paradigm if it was in the local community. I think it really needs to be in the national case for us to shift the paradigm. But to me, the quality of thinking that is where we just kind of are in charge and we feel empowered and we figure out what kind of system we're going to have and we set that in motion, that quality of thinking is a very empowered place. It's a very creative place. There's no rules. It's just us talking, figuring this stuff out. Mm-hmm. That's a very powerful place. Once you set up here are the rules that we're going to play by, now you and I were born into that. You and I didn't say, hey, how are we going to hang out together as a people? We didn't even have a vote about saying, yeah, let's have this constitution and have that be in charge. Mm-hmm. Or let's use this way of making collective decisions. We weren't a part of that conversation. We're not in that at all. We just were born into a system, and we take that as a given. We just close that off, and we put a curtain up, and we say, okay, now that's life. I live inside that box. And now I operate as though that's all of life. It isn't all of life. And the longer we stay inside that box and think that's life, think that we're fish inside a pool and we can't get outside of it, as long as we stay inside that, we're doomed. I mean, my wife keeps teaching me not to say that anymore, but so I got to pull that back. But the system can't work. Our systems cannot work. We've reached a point where the system design isn't working, but we're staying inside our thinking box, trying to make what we got work. And we have to step outside of it and go, oh, this isn't working. You know, somehow staying inside this box, we created something called a corporation. It's almost like a science fiction movie where the aliens have invaded and they take over, you know, and their values take over. And so we work for them and we serve these corporate values. And somehow they stole our lives somehow. And now we're trashing the planet. Nobody, you can go interview everybody. Everybody's in agreement. We don't want to trash the planet. But corporations are in charge, so we're going to trash the planet whether we want to or not. So how did that happen? Well, it happened constitutionally. The U.S. Constitution set up that corporations, they didn't mean to set it up. The founders didn't know about that. They didn't want that. But through interpretations of the Constitution and through the history and so forth, now constitutionally, corporations are like people. They're more powerful people than we are because they can live forever. And you know, you can't put them in jail. They just go on. And they aren't real people because they don't have any values other than the bottom line.
My reading of the Declaration of Independence is that it's incumbent on each of us to ratify the Constitution in a certain sense. I don't care how good a system is, if it's handed down to me in an authoritarian sense, I'm going to chafe under that system. And we were talking before the show about the book Escaping the Matrix by Richard K. Moore,
yes,
which I find a phenomenal book, and his 9-stage process model. And one of the lessons of this model, which I find extremely useful for understanding why most social movements fail while some succeed, one of the most profound insights I find in that is that it's vital that no steps are skipped, that everyone needs to move through each step of the decision-making process in order to have buy-in, that no system can be imposed from the top, that authority derives from the bottom. And that really rings through very loud and clear in your book.
Well, Richard's book, Escaping the Matrix, I like it too because the hero in his book is the Wisdom Council. I mean, when he boils it down, how do we get this to happen? He's talking about dynamic facilitation and the Wisdom Council, which is what I'm talking about. And so I know that you spent some time with Richard in Ireland. So, and Richard has been to the seminar that I teach too. So, yeah, the key is. Okay, we can talk about the problems and we can talk about the crisis that we're facing and we can talk about how we're in this box, and then there's a way out of it. There's a way out of it. There's a way to solve this whole thing. And the solving isn't like, I don't know the actual solution, but what I do know is how to release people from the box that they don't know they're in. Mm-hmm. And to release the field of solutions that exist. There's solutions all over the place. People already know how to solve lots of these problems. We already have enough food. We know how to have peace with people. We just can't do it in the system. So as soon as we're outside being authentic and we're in a field that's been structured of visiting together collaboratively, and this isn't just releasing people out of the box where they go back to fighting and that sort of thing. It's about creating an environment where their natural tendency is to collaborate and figure out what's best for everybody and share and be fair and that sort of thing. Now, inside the box, the field is set up for special interests and for competition. For you to, okay, I've got greed inside me just as much as I have wanting to serve life. Our system sets up that we bring out the greed, that we focus on self-interest. And if you want to serve community, well, nobody's going to pay you for that. You'll never get reimbursed for that. You'll get reimbursed for being self-interested. And that's a stupid idea for a society that's interdependent.
So One of the ways of understanding the box is that it's the rules of the game that are handed down from on high, let's say. So we cooperate in the sense that we agree to abide by these rules and we agree to compete.
Yeah, you're saying the word agree. Yeah, that's true. And what really happens in the box is it structures how we talk and how we think and how we look at issues. In other words, how we're going to make a decision is we're going to have this argument, and then we're going to vote, and then 51% of the vote, if 51% say we're going to do X, then we do X no matter what anybody else thinks. That is the system of thinking and talking that we are going to use to make collective decisions. Now, it's way better than what we had before, because we had this king and so forth it was just up to one person, and sometimes that worked out great, and sometimes that worked out horribly. But now we have a system where at least we have a vote. But if you're in the 49% minority, it's as if you don't have a vote. And in fact, today, if you vote for a congressperson or whatever, I mean, 95% of them get reelected. The incumbents get reelected 95% of the time. So, and most of the time when you vote, it really doesn't matter. It's just a symbolic act. It's too late. I mean, if you're not in Iowa or New Hampshire, you don't even get to decide who the candidates are going to be. So the vote really isn't there, I mean, in a lot of cases. So what we want is a system, I think everybody wants, is a system where you're involved and you get to be a part of thinking these things, and we get to employ common sense. And the only reason why we're not doing that is because people don't think it's possible.
So let's move from theory to in practice. Let's say in my hometown of Ashland, Oregon, we pick some issue, any issue, let's say affordable housing, and we choose 12 people from that community at random, and we bring them together, and these manners of interacting have been inculcated in everyone. We barely have any models for anything different. And so we bring this group of 12 people together, and let's say they decide that affordable housing is the issue of interest that they want to talk about.
That's good. Yeah, the group chooses, not somebody else.
Yes, so the group chooses affordable housing, let's say, and their first impulse is to just to vent in the way that they always have, one side of the issue or the other.
Right.
And then we have a facilitator, let's say, making notes on a board. And now can you remind me the 4 different kinds of categories of notes they would take? There's problems, solutions.
Yeah, well, it probably doesn't matter. Problem statements, data, solutions, concerns. But the point is that the facilitator uses those charts to structure a certain kind of thinking and talking. And that's the key piece, is that it's where everybody comes up with unanimous views in the end.
Well, I'm very interested in these kinds of geometric models, diagrams of communication, and by having that facilitator put all those ideas and suggestions on a board, it shifts the pattern, really, the geometry of the communication. And in the book you talk about how that minimizes this kind of back and forth that can often happen between participants. So that allows people to state what they already know and to purge, in a certain sense, that you use the term. And then there's a moment that you can identify when the energy in the room shifts. Can you describe that kind of, there's a certain emptiness that happens, and how do you identify that moment of shift? Because that's really the shift to the new paradigm, isn't it?
Well, it is in a way. There's thinking and talking from what we already know. And there's judging. You know, like, is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? Do I agree with this? Do I disagree with that? We don't want any of that talking. I mean, that kind of conversation, which is what our current system encourages, is not the kind of conversation that leads to unanimity, that leads to the best answers. So we're trying to have a kind of conversation where people use the knowledge they have, but they just kind of talk naturally, and then they notice in the end that, hey, we all are saying the same thing here. And that shift does happen, and we have a way to help that happen through dynamic facilitation, but I'm worried we won't have time to talk about it really that much here. But in the end, people come up with unanimity, and they come up with it in a way, this is a small group of people, that their thinking process resonates to everybody. So if everybody can hear what they're saying and hear the story of how they went there, and they come up with something around affordable housing, everybody kind of looks at that and says, yeah, that's what we need to do for now. And probably the group will come up with, and that isn't the real problem. The real problem is the fact that we have this certain people with, we have a distribution of wealth problem here that's a little bit crazy. And so chances are the problem will get bigger. People will say, okay, this is what we need to do right now for the affordable housing, but the real problem is, why do we have this tax structure? Why do we have this system set up for this compensation package structure? Why do we have this race to the bottom? Why, can't we figure out some way to solve that? And so once people start thinking creatively about these big issues, even if they don't go anywhere, which they will, they make headway in terms of building community and building a sense of fairness.
And involvement. Engagement.
And engagement. So even if you're just stewing on these issues and not making headway, but you do make headway, but just that alone solves a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. In other words, you don't have racism anymore if we all are treating one another with respect and we all like one another and we're excited about our differences. Mm-hmm. Racism goes away. Wars go away. You just don't get those anymore. Mm-hmm. So if we change the way we talk and think and how we make decisions together, and I don't even call them decisions, I call them choices, then everything changes.
So in this sharing of, let's say, entrenched positions back and forth, there comes kind of a magical moment where people begin to see the greater context, and the problem somehow gets redefined and in a way that reveals people's common beliefs and morals and ethics and values.
Exactly. Everybody wants to be liked. They want to like other people. Everybody wants to have a society that works for everybody. They want fairness. We do. Okay, I'm competitive. You set up a game, I want to win. I don't care if the other guys, have less points than I do. I want them to have less points than we do. But when the game's over, I'm actually in a different place. Now I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm doing something else. I'm visiting with people and like everybody, and it's a different paradigm. Mm-hmm. But we have been born into this game where we think the competition is the way life works. We think people are just naturally self-interested. Well, yeah, they are in a sense, but only because it's a game, only because we structured that box.
So, assuming that their interest is piqued by hearing this conversation, and now they want to take the next step. They come to your website, societiesbreakthrough.com.
Yes.
And they can contact you, and they can organize wisdom councils in their area. They can convene these gatherings of 12 randomly selected community members to represent all sides of the discussion in the community, yes?
Yeah.
And that's at a local level. Can you tell us what you're doing now about instigating a national level wisdom council?
Yeah, if somebody wanted to at local level, they could just convene a meeting and hear about it, I suppose, and hopefully get a convening team to come out of that. But in the national level, we just have a couple of minutes, I see. Actually, what we're going to do in the next couple of weeks is Swami Beyondananda. I think you know him. He's a nationally known comedian. Read my book and is very excited about gathering people to talk about to hearing more and seeing if there is an interest to pursue a national wisdom council among his network of friends. And that's in the Bay Area, and there's another group that's convening a wisdom council process, or a group of conveners that we'll be meeting with at the same time in Oakland, interested in creating a wisdom council process for Oakland. You know, these things have a fits and starts kind of approach to them, but to me they have to happen. It's not an option. We have to start thinking and talking in this way, and we can't rely on the system that we've been handed to make good collective decisions, because it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. So it doesn't matter it does matter who we elect, but the system itself is the problem, not the elected people in it.
Well, I believe that more and more people are coming to recognize that it is a systemic problem and not just a crisis in society that we face, and not just a crisis in individual subsystems. And it's a real pleasure to sit down and talk with another optimist who believes in the transformative power of communication and who has a vision of the transformative power of community building and how to build community and actually to establish a democracy in our country, which has so much promise.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. And thank you for coming over from Seattle and coming up from Ashland. And thank you very much for being here. And this is Dan Shaw, danshaw.com, and a student of democracy. And we'll see where your PhD studies take you.
Well, this is a darn fine start. Thanks, Jim.
Good.